There's a story that never made it into your textbook, a decision made in a locked room by people whose names you'll never know, that changed everything for someone, somewhere. And they decided you didn't need to hear it. What if I told you that within the last 50 years, a democratic government conducted a medical experiment on its own citizens without their consent and let it run for decades after they knew it was fatal? Not in some distant dictatorship. Here, in the West. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a documented fact buried in declassified files. And it's just the beginning. Because for every secret that sees the light, a dozen more remain in the dark. Today, we're pulling on one thread. The thread that connects a doomed Tuskegee syphilis patient, a radioactive American city, and a weapon so strange it sounds like science fiction. This is about the darkest things governments tried to hide and why they almost got away with it. Our first stop is Macon County, Alabama, 1932. The U.S. Public Health Service launches a study on syphilis. They recruit 600 African American men, 399 with the disease, 201 without. They're told they're being treated for bad blood. They are offered free meals, medical exams, and burial insurance. It sounds almost charitable, but here's the first hidden truth. There was never any intention to cure them. The real goal was to track the natural progression of untreated syphilis, all the way to paralysis, insanity, and death. Even when penicillin became the proven, life-saving cure in 1947, the men in the study were deliberately denied it. Researchers actively prevented them from seeking treatment elsewhere. They watched as men went blind, as their nervous systems collapsed, as they died painful, preventable deaths. The study wasn't a brief, horrible mistake. It was a planned, ongoing atrocity that lasted for 40 years. A whistleblower finally brought it down in 1972. But here's the question that haunted me. How? How does something like this not just happen, but persist? The declassified memos and meeting notes reveal the chilling psychology. It wasn't just racism, though that was the foundation. It was a toxic mix of scientific curiosity detached from humanity, bureaucratic inertia, and a fundamental belief that these men were not patients, but data points. Their suffering was not a tragedy, but a result. And that reclassification, human to data point, is the first step down the darkest path any institution can take. But what happens when the threat isn't a deliberate lie, but a withheld truth? When the danger is literally in the air you breathe? To understand that, we need to go to Hanford, Washington, during the height of the Manhattan Project. Hanford was the plutonium factory for the atomic bomb. Its mission was paramount, cloaked in ultimate secrecy. And in pursuing that mission, they released something into the environment. Radioactive iodine-131, a lot of it. It settled on fields, got into the grass, was eaten by cows, and concentrated in their milk. Families downwind in communities like the nearby White Bluffs and Hanford Reach drank that milk. Children with their growing bodies and small thyroids were especially vulnerable. The government knew. Internal reports from the 1940s and 50s show they were monitoring radiation levels. They knew there was a risk of thyroid disease, even cancer. But they said nothing. Not for years, not for decades. The narrative of national security meant that not only were the bomb plans a secret, but the cost of building them was too. Citizens became an unwitting control group in a massive, unplanned experiment. It wasn't until the 1980s, under legal and public pressure, that the Hanford downwinders story began to emerge. The government's defense? They claimed the doses were low and that the science of the time was uncertain. But the memos tell a different story, a story of knowing enough to be concerned, but choosing, actively, to look the other way. The secret wasn't an act of commission like Tuskegee. It was an act of omission, a silence that was just as deadly. So we've seen secrets that target the body, but what about the mind? This is where our story takes a turn into the realm of what feels like a spy thriller. The year is 1953. At a CIA safe house in New York City, a scientist named Frank Olson plunges to his death from a 10th-story window. The official story? Suicide during a depressive episode. But the truth was a secret so explosive it took his family 25 years to uncover it. Frank Olson wasn't just a depressed man. He was a U.S. Army biochemist working with the CIA on a program with a bland, terrifying name, MKUltra. Its goal, to master mind control, to develop techniques for interrogation, for extracting information, and potentially for programming unaware human agents. They tested everything: LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, electroshock therapy, often on subjects without their knowledge or consent. 9 days before his death, he was at a remote CIA retreat. His superiors, without his knowledge, slipped a massive dose of LSD into his after-dinner drink. He spent the next several days in a profound, terrifying psychosis, believing the agency was against him. They brought him to New York to see a psychiatrist, but according to declassified files, the man wasn't a therapist at all, but another CIA operative. The night he died, he was in that hotel room with his handler. The family's lawsuit eventually forced a rare presidential apology. The secret here wasn't just a project, it was the erasure of a man's sanity, and then the orchestrated cover-up of his murder. MKUltra shows us the ultimate governmental hubris, the belief that even human consciousness itself is a territory to be conquered and controlled. Ethics be damned.